and that was it. So I was no longer racing, and I was sitting in my comfortable recliner, poured a glass of scotch to console myself, and I put on the Top Split broadcast and watched Miles and the Top Split drivers finish it out. I wanted to at least be somehow connected to the event because I was so hyped for it. And I had a good time driving it. I really did have a good time in this car. But watching the finish that Miles just described, regardless of whether Miles was racing with us as a sim team or not, I was sitting there, edge of my seat, just going nuts for the finish of this. And one thing I will say, and I want your comment on it for the Top Split, it seemed like right to the very end when I tuned in, I don't know how it went, for the first half and a quarter of the race, it seemed like there was a lot of pack racing more than maybe the traditional IndyCar Dallara IR-18 offered. There was a little more of a pack thing with more cars, because I feel like in the long run with the traditional IndyCar years past at Indianapolis, people wear their tires differently, can't make the corners as effectively and can't apex the corners, and they start to get aero push, and they are a little more separated. You see fewer cars in that final lead pack.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've done the official 500 3 or 4 times. I forget now. Best finishing that was second as well. So, whatever. Yeah, the difference is the IndyCar gets slower as the run goes on because you wear the tire fall off is greater than the fuel burn off. I say that most of the time. It depends on setups and whatever, but generally that's true. IR-01 fastest lap was the last lap. If you had no fuel in the tank, that's as fast as it would go. So, but there was more pack racing, but it was interesting in that there was always 2 packs. There was 15th and up, and 16th to 33rd.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Because I want to point, I was not the only Mad Sim guy in Top Split. Cody Richardson and Andrew Koska made it. In fact, we qualified within 5,000ths of each other, something stupid. It's almost like we were running the exact same setup that I'd put.
We'll talk about that in a second, actually.
A few hundred laps and just doing 4-lap sprints. And then I figured it out in the session before. Anyway, I can talk about that later. But it was kind of funny in the middle part of the race because me and Andrew were always the last 2 cars of the lead pack because we were fuel saving. We were 10th to 15th pretty much until the end, until Andrew got taken out. But as soon as you went behind 16th, I don't know if it was setups, driver mentality, I don't know, talent level. It wasn't talent level. Cody was stuck back there, but he was stuck. You would accordion on the start, and 15th was always the worst.
Yeah.
Whenever 10th to 15th, it was slam the brakes on the front straight as the green flag comes out. So they'd lose a second. If you got 1.8 seconds back, you had to run faster than the leader to catch the lead pack. And if you're in 20th, you're not doing that. So you'd end up with the lead pack and then the second pack. In normal Indy races, Cup car, Indy car, pretty much anything on a flat oval, you pack up, and then after the first or second green flag pit stop, you end up in packs of 2 or 3 or single cars just doing laps. And that never happened, partially because we always had a caution.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, the middle part was a caution fest. There was a section in the middle of the race when some guys stayed out and other guys pitted, and they had always been running 20th, and they're now 1st through 8th. And the next 3 cautions were just them eating shit because it's been understeer city the whole race. They get up to the front and it's immediately oversteer. When I was running mid pack, it was full stiff rear bar, full soft front bar, lift every corner. The car would not turn if you were over 240 miles an hour. You had to lift pretty good and roll into it. It was fun because you suck up, and it was fun a little bit, saved a lot of fuel. And you could kind of choose when you wanted to just go. But as soon as you got to 4th, you had to flip the bars immediately because the car just tried to spin out.
Yeah.
It was there was a magic point where it gained downforce. You stopped being a drafting car and turned into a corner car, And that was where every time somebody who had not experienced that got into that position, insta spin, hit the wall, caution. And yeah, that took out it was a really interesting race. And yeah, it did stay packed up, but we tried our hardest not to pack. There were people coming at, like, you had to stay in the exit of pit lane, and people had never practiced it, like trying that hard. Drove in the middle of the lead pack.
Oh, no.
that was lap 70 or something.
Oh no.
The one time I came off the corner, it was just a parking lot of cars just stopped in the track. Half of them were people who just come to a stop because cars are bouncing. And so that's another thing that I knew was going to be bad just from practice. If you break any part of the car, it bottoms out and you can't steer it. Like, braking doesn't do anything, accelerating doesn't help, and it doesn't turn. So if you hit the wall exit of one of the corners, you're going to just go to the inside and then hit the wall of the next corner because you can't do anything. But we had, I don't know, 15, 16 cars running at the end. It's more than I expected.
Yeah, it was respectable from what I could see. I mean, so the entertainment value of the finish, the finish as something to view and observe as esports entertainment, sim racing, iRacing entertainment was a success. It made its rounds. I think I have some clips and images up at madsimracing.com as a in the house post if anybody wants to see that didn't catch it. As a wrap up, I guess, of this type of car, this type of track, after running the Dallara IR-18, the traditional Indy car, and not really having that this year, did this scratch the itch? Was it better than in years past? Where did we stand on that, Rob? I'll even accept your comments as somebody that thought he was going to race this race, but
I don't know. I'd rather race the normal car if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking.
I think, based on what I watched, because I watched a lot of the different splits in Majors, because I follow all the different channels between the Atlantic and Pacific regions for what they do their broadcasting on, and it seems like it went pretty well. Like, I think it was a success.
I think, I would second that. I think it was a success. I mean, it scratched the itch for me. It was different, but it behaved uniquely. But it was it was close, and then you had to work the gears in the corners. It was similar. It was a Dallara. It sounded different and it behaved different. What do you think, Miles, as somebody that's been on iRacing for quite a while?
I think we should go back to the 2005 version of the IndyCar myself, but that's just me. It was fun.
Yeah. If
we did it again next year, I'd do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it scratched the itch because it wasn't an Indy 500.
Yeah.
Because there is a little. It was like a Daytona Indy 500 in a way. There was no way to make that car fun for slow guys. You had to have some level of patience and talent to not just die.
Yeah.
And especially in qualifying, especially getting up to speed and going. If you didn't know where to start, you were going to be lost. And you could see that in the qualifying order for the majors. There was the top 20-ish were covered within 50 thousandths of a second, and the next 5 were covered by a tenth of a second, and then the next 40 were a full second. So that there was the guys up the front that had control over their cars and speed and were going to compete. And then even second split, even the guys that were a couple tenths off, y'all finished before we did. Y'all did a better job of not crashing. Probably, but that's the y'all are good enough to finish the race and not die.
Yeah.
And I have to say, even if you did get taken out with a quarter of the race to go or whatever, that race was hard.
Yeah.
There was a point in the caution fest in the middle where my eyes glazed over under the caution because the first half had taken so much focus not to literally just run into the car in front of you.
Yeah.
that, the second I got a second win in the second half because like, oh, I can win this.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was as soon as I got to the front and realized how good the car was compared to everybody else, it was, okay, yeah, I need to focus on this because I can like do something. But that would just, if that had gone green through, so most Indy 500s you have like 8 cautions in the first 40 laps, and the last 160 are green.
Correct. Yep, that's been my experience.
If it had done that, like that would have been hard.
Yeah, I was worn out because, and Rob, I'm sure you knew this just from qualifying. In this car at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, if you don't start to turn the wheel left before you traditionally think you would in the traditional Indy car, you're not going to go flat through the corner. I quickly learned that if I want to make it through the corner flat or as good as possible and get a good run, I had to turn that wheel left coming off the straight into the short chute way quicker and way more precisely to get right where that white line is in the grass and the curbing, or I just wasn't going to make it. I was going to have to lift to not slide up into the wall. And I mean, you get that with the IR-18, but with this IR-01, it's more of a brain test. It's like one of those apps on your phone that you try to keep your brain sharp, and it's much more difficult in that way.
This is Into the Apex Motorsport Podcast Network.